party on the stream today, man. What a good time. Mr. Crypto Vigilante. It's been, what, maybe a year or so since I came on your show, man. How have you been doing?
Oh, you're muted, man.
You're on mute. There we go. Until then, man, dude, what a crazy time in Bitcoin, huh? With op return, something that's been around for 11 years now at this point, 12 years almost. And we're having s'mores, man. Crypto Vigilante, bro. How have you been?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for having me on. I'm pleasure to be here. I really like the way you guys have always embraced the entirety of the space with Emblem Vault. So big props to you guys for having the insights and to do that. A lot of people haven't done that, haven't embraced the entirety of the space. So I want to commend you guys for doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's tough, moving in between ecosystems because a lot of people are so pigeonhole, or they're so, tribalistic, or they tend to just kind of stick with their meme coins, right? Or with their UTXOs or with their NFTs. And so, you lose community members when you bounce between these different ecosystems because it's just so much information to grasp. But man, without a doubt for me though, the Bitcoin ecosystem has always been my favorite. I think maybe just because it has such a long history that there's always some drama that's happening. But
yeah, like right now, correct.
Yeah, I'd love to get your take on the current happenings and what's happened this week, and your thoughts on from your kind of historical point of view, what's going on now and how you view it.
Well, we as individuals, we can't really judge the intentions of others. Well, we can come to logical conclusions based on what we observe happening around and through the effects of what they do. So BTC chose a path of scaling, which was one of a layered approach to scaling. And it's pretty obvious to all of us who are watching and paying close attention that BTC is setting itself up to scale on chain, but they have to do it in a very smart, way that it does not arouse suspicion and that it does not push people to look at big blocker alternatives. And the main foundation for my analysis in this is based on the fact that they allowed ordinals to exist to begin with. They could have shut that down the moment they came on to stage. We also have to keep in mind that since over a year now, Rusty Russell has been spearheading amongst the core devs what they call the Great Script Restoration, which is to re-enable over 19 opcodes to BTC. Now, for anyone who has been paying attention for the past decade or so, this is big block Bitcoin vision. This is the understanding that BTC is coming up against a wall where the subsidy that Satoshi left us will not suffice the capital influx that is coming in via fiat to drive the price of the coin up. And so I have to verify these numbers still, but I was looking at over the top this morning. A lot of people are saying that it costs around $200,000 in Germany to mine one BTC. That's around $90,000. So the price of BTC has to keep climbing, and we're at the point where I have to ask this question. It's a rhetorical question, right? How much higher can it go? And what other players can you onboard? Well, you've already onboarded BlackRock. You've already onboarded MasterCard. You've onboarded Wall Street through MicroStrategy. You're onboarding the planet already. And you really have to give the market, in my opinion, a lot more than what BTC is offering in order for more capital to be infused into it. So you're onboarding the US government. You're onboarding a lot of state governments, a lot of local governments throughout the world. But yet there's still this pressure that BTC has on itself in order to keep the price over a certain level. And that's something that the core devs have it's, you know, I am not privy to their interior communication, but I do see what they've proposed to the market in real time. So, for example, the person who proposed this, the expansion of the op return limit, Peter Todd, about a year and a half ago, gave a talk at Monerotopia where he was proposing directly taxing your BTC wallets to subsidize the miners. And this is called demiurge. I was the only one to speak up, and I told him, you know what? I think we all agree here that taxation is theft. And I don't think anyone's going to agree with you imposing that on investors of Bitcoin, contributors to Bitcoin, that they are going to be taxed directly out of their wallets in order to subsidize the miners. The other idea that has been thrown around, and it's something that now it's being openly spoken about, is to break the 21 million cap in market supply for BTC itself. And there's a lot of reasons given, excuses given, and justifications given, such as there's a lot of coins that have been lost, and also Satoshi. There's even the proposal out there that to steal Satoshi's coins from him.
Satoshi's coins? Come on, man.
Yeah, no, that's real. That's the proposal out there.
It's so crazy to hear this from people who you would think would be more of a libertarian bent to impose tax on people and stuff. It's literally insanity.
Are they?
That sort of thing. I don't know, man.
Are they?
You know, well,
Because,
I guess in the way you would think, well, you know, Bitcoin has this kind of libertarian birth, so we'd say, or at least ideal at the beginning, and how far it's moved maybe from that. And I mean, even the whole block size war, very much. I mean, I would say I would take the opposite position of the small blockers, but at the same time, I would admit, and I would say, you know, actually the small blockers were correct in solving the first issue, which is, how do these coins have any value at all? Right? What we've seen in any other attempts, basically, is that they go in the opposite direction against Bitcoin, right? Even if they have, you know, similar security principles and hard money and all these sort of other things, they have a very difficult time storing value or holding their value. And the Bitcoiners, the small blockers, like they were right in that. But now we're getting into this like secondary effect, which is like, how does the network support itself, right? How can we ensure that mine? Yeah, go ahead.
This was the crux of the Civil War, was the big blockers had the foresight to see that this was going to be an inevitability in the future. Now, I agree with you in that the small blockers made Bitcoin palatable to the powers that be, because they took away the teeth and the claws away from Bitcoin and made Bitcoin into something that was docile, something that can be tamed, something that does not pose a threat to the systems that run the world. So Bitcoin has a place now with the banking system. It gives the banking system a reason to be. It gives the big tech world a reason to exist alongside Bitcoin. MasterCard can exist alongside Bitcoin. Bitcoin in its original design proposes something else to the world, which is, we don't need the legacy system. We can do better. And that's something that we all have to agree that it's something that such a threat was never going to be fully embraced by the powers that be. It would be naive for us as Bitcoiners to assume that the fullness of Bitcoin was going to be embraced readily by big tech and fintech. Yeah. So I agree with you. But then again, it's interesting what's happening, because it is the core devs now who spearheaded the small blocker initiative during the Civil War that are now spearheading the initiative to be the big blockers within BTC now.
So I mean, think about that though. Is this the genius of it? And I'm not saying any of them are particularly like plan this, but if they Trojan horse it in by making it small block, right? Store of value, Trojan horse it in. Wall Street can package it up in ETFs and sell it. U.S. government wants to buy it, and they Trojan horse it in, and then they make it big block, right? Is that the solution? Like, is that the thing? Like, oh my God, they Trojan horse Bitcoin, and now it eats the world. Like, is that? Do you see that as a possibility, or that?
That is the only path that they have. And that is, if they were to see this in hindsight and plan for this in foresight, I got to give it to them. Genius move,
right.
because they allowed Bitcoin to step in and be embraced by all the giants, by all the governments. And notice how this is being carried about in a very cautious way. They've already signaled to the world that that is the path that they're taking. And again, the Great Script Restoration, ordinals. So we already know that this is the path forward. And I think that they have to do it in a very cautious way, because there is already a scalable Bitcoin. There is already a version of Bitcoin that is fully scalable with all of the opcodes. So if BTC has to be very cautious in the way it does that, because if it does it in a way that is too aggressive, then people would ask themselves, well, why won't I hedge myself with a scalable Bitcoin version? Like BSV or even Bitcoin Cash, if you want to argue for that as well. Why wouldn't I hedge for that with a scalable Bitcoin that already exists? And so I agree with you. It's very genius if this is something that they planned out in advance. And I got to give it to them if that was the case. Very good job. You psyop the world into accepting Bitcoin, and now you're on the path to scaling Bitcoin. And I don't see any other path forward for BTC, because there's also a conflict of interest that we have to keep in mind, that they've been selling the world, the VC world. A lot of investors have been sold on this layered approach to scaling. So they still need to cater to that audience in letting them know that their investment was not a sunk cost. They already made a horrible mistake with the Lightning Network, which was a complete flop. And now they're like redirecting the focus of investment into which is big block technology now, properly speaking, not a layered approach to scaling, but to say that Bitcoin is Turing complete, that Bitcoin, that you can compute script on chain, that you can do the computation outside of the blockchain and attest it on chain, while still having your cake and eating it. Your cake being not having digital footprint on the blockchain, but having the computations done outside of the blockchain. So there is that whole world of venture capital that has invested and reinvested itself into many different layered approaches to scaling. So they have to be, this is the difficulty that BTC faces, is that on the one hand, it's moving in this direction, but on the other hand, they have a rival network that already has everything ready to go. If words gets out by the wrong person who has a little bit too much clout in BTC, that there is a better way of doing things than doing it through a layered approach, that you can do it on chain, then you have now a rival Bitcoin camp that poses a giant existential threat to BTC, in which this rival Bitcoin group of people that have kept building on chain, building on Bitcoin's original design, this group of Bitcoiners can not only flip BTC theoretically, but in doing so also consume the entirety of the Bitcoin infrastructure. So it's a very
right. So what you're saying is
be very cautious.
They need to bring in big blocks or some form of it, while still selling and holding on to this like store of value kind of narrative, and kind of morph into what people were fighting for in 2017 in a way that's palatable, and everybody just doesn't go, oh, this is bullshit. Let's go back to let's just grab one of these other systems that's already built out and already functioning and move our money over there, basically, or move our value over there.
Correct.
So basically not be called out for the bad vibes they created in 2016 and 17 by calling everybody scammers for trying to do big blocks, and then do big blocks themselves, and kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
That road out, which has a lot of pitfalls in it, as you see, like people are already pushing back.
Well, I mean, even Michael Saylor is investing his research and development in a project he calls Orange, where he is enabling real world assets on chain. So the fact that he's even, his entire, he gave a whole talk where he ceded the place to the lead person who leads that R&D effort within strategy to give a talk on this topic at the last Bitcoin conference. Says a lot. And it shows you that is indeed where this is all moving. And it's very they have to play it very, very tight, like you described. And
I mean,
the best case scenario
about like Saylor, like with, I mean, there was that famous video before the Ethereum ETF came out where he's like, only Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the only, I don't know if you remember that, where he's like,
There is no second
way.
best.
There is no second best, but there's no way that basically Ethereum is going to get the ETF. There's no way it's going to be accepted by this administration. And then literally like a week later it happened, right? And he had to like he just pivoted, right? And you almost see like these guys are just going to, I feel like there's enough smart people there, obviously some brilliant people in that kind of core group who it just feels like, man, they're probably going to figure this out. And even with all of the kind of backbiting, lying, manipulating, it just feels like they did it in 2017. It feels like they're going to be able to do it again. Do you feel like they're going to be able to do it again?
100%, because they have veto power. And what people don't realize is that Core runs Bitcoin. Core is they run Bitcoin. They gave people the illusion that they had some sort of democracy with the user activated soft fork, but in reality that was no democracy, because I myself could have spun up 100,000 servers and giving you the illusion that there were 100,000 individual votes for a user activated soft fork. So they have veto power, and just look at how much bureaucracy anyone that wants to propose anything good for Bitcoin has to go through with the BIT process. And all of a sudden, Peter Todd yesterday just comes in and says, I'm going to do this. And he just, the bureaucracy is cleared for him. There is no, and so rightfully so, people who are more purists within BTC that actually want to lower the block size, like Luke Dasher has been promoting, they rightfully so are up in arms, like what's going on here, and we should promote the version of Bitcoin that stays in line for the reason why we had the Civil War, which is to keep Bitcoin as a store of value with no spamming of the blockchain, was their argument. And so you see a lot of people consorting around a Bitcoin not implementation. And they say, and they're pretty much saying Bitcoin Core is compromised. Bitcoin Core is a place that is centrally planned, and Bitcoin Core is harming Bitcoin. But this is, if you take the small blocker narrative to its logical conclusion, then they're correct. But if you step back and you start assuming things the way we've, within this conversation, we've been talking about how maybe this is just Bitcoin Core playing at a higher level where they're actually making Bitcoin applicable to the world to then enable the opcodes and scale the block size and scale these Bitcoin superpowers that we know are possible, then I think is genius. So the problem again with that approach is that Bitcoin Core has to be very cautious that by doing so, they're not signaling to the big blocker camp of Bitcoin, because that is their one existential threat. The only existential threat for BTC is another Genesis block Bitcoin that is already fully scalable. Because if that baby takes off, then it doesn't only, again, flip BTC in price, but also consumes its infrastructure in the process. So it's they have to play very careful. And I think that they have the penchant to go ahead and do this now, because you have the two leaders of both big blocker initiatives, Craig Wright and Roger Ver, being hammered down by the law. And who is behind the hammering of the law against these two big block leaders? Well, there is a popular Reddit thread where Greg Maxwell threatens Roger Ver with working with the tax authorities to go after Roger. And he says out loud, he says on the Reddit thread, if someone were to do this, they would get a 30% out of however much the IRS would get back from the person who's been infringing on whatever IRS parameters are broken. So, and then you had the whole COPA trial against Craig Wright, which is like the entirety of big tech going after one Bitcoiner. And guys, this is what's like a lot of people don't realize is that you have Mark Zuckerberg, OpenAI, Jack Dorsey, Michael Saylor. You literally have the big tech cabal forming around going against one Bitcoiner because he has patents. But then again, you mean to tell me that like big tech doesn't possess patents and that they don't fight for their patents? So it's almost like how is big tech out of all sectors in the economy going to position themselves as all of a sudden the cypherpunk open source ethos champions? That should be odd to any listener, and they should be questioning themselves like, what's going on here? Why patents for me but not for thee? What's going on here? So I think that having the stage set where you have the two leaders, you know, I wouldn't call them leaders because no one's really a leader in Bitcoin, but two big figureheads in the big block world being pressured legally by the small blocker network. I think the small blocker network kind of is now saying, well, now we can scale Bitcoin. Now we can move and do it in a way where our rivals, the big blockers, have been crippled, so we can go in. And so I honestly think that's what's happening right now.
Well, tell me what the negative of that would be, other than, you know, bag holding, you know, people holding different bags. Other than that, as someone who I know believes in, you know, freedom and liberty, what would be the negative of this actually working? If this actually worked and Bitcoin actually became like a medium of exchange again, and had basically, you know, Trojan horse its way into the US government and Wall Street and everything, and then becomes the medium of exchange, fully scalable through big blocks. Give me the negative outcome of that, aside from potentially downside to other people's bags?
So I don't really think there's a negative there because, you know, there is the ideal world, how we would like the world to be, but then there's the real world, and the real world is always present. And ideally, you would have wanted a Bitcoin, in my opinion, that empowers the people. That is the anti-Samson Mao approach, which is Bitcoin is for the person who lives with less than $2 a day. Bitcoin is for that person in the emerging economy that you go into any plaza in Latin America and they're hustling cell phone minutes. You empower them. That is the user base that we should have all been going after, not the person who has readily available credit, who is within a first world capitals market, the person who is, see, that person really doesn't need Bitcoin. That person already has the safety net of a welfare state. That person really doesn't need Bitcoin. Crypto has not gone after that world, which is over 3 billion unbanked. Crypto has not helped those individuals out because us in the first world feel like we know better. That's always been kind of like our sin, that we know better, we know how to help them. The truth is that if we have better technology, what we do is just offer it to them and for them to figure things out on their own. That has always been my dream for Bitcoin. That is my goal for Bitcoin, regardless of who embraces it. Now, the problem by the small blocker approach to psyop these elite and have them buy into a harmless Bitcoin to then later on enable the Bitcoin superpowers. The problem with that is that now you have a Bitcoin that is captured. It's a Bitcoin that is captured by big tech and big fintech. And this Bitcoin that is captured now, it poses an opposition to a world where people are empowered. And we find ourselves now moving into a more of a dystopia environment where it's really a corporate proof of stake model, but on steroids, where only a few will have access to I really do hope that what we're talking about comes true, because it still gives an opening to that sector in the market that needs Bitcoin the most. I really hope that this happens, but my dream would have been to have never given these legacy players a seat at the table.
Yeah.
For Bitcoin to have been a grassroots effort that opposes them, Bitcoin with teeth, and that's why to this day I'm still an advocate for big block Bitcoin. And if not big block Bitcoin, then definitely privacy coins, because privacy coins get us there immediately. Bitcoin with teeth, Bitcoin, aggressive Bitcoin, big block Bitcoin gets us there out in the open by competing out in the open market on a transparent ledger. So I I welcome the world as is, but no matter what, that should be our foundation for adoption. And it's not like a normative should, but rather it's the most stable of foundations. People who are using microtransactions in their day-to-day life, who don't do it out of pleasure or out of some addiction to gambling, and we see with degenomics, but rather people who need it every day. Yeah. Those, the unbanked, that should be our focus. That should be our foundation. How do we help them out?
It's interesting though, like with the idea of captured Bitcoin. Like I've gotten into chats with Luke on X and stuff, and you know, and he we went down the rabbit hole of like, you know, what percentage of users need to run their own full node for Bitcoin to, you know, truly be decentralized. The number he gave me was 85%. And I was like, Luke, that's completely impossible. And he's like, I know, but it's still what the number we need. I'm like, well, what are you even talking about then? Why are we even, there's no way on earth that could happen. Right. And so some of them, I don't know, there's just like a delusion there of like just the way humans operate. I think, at least in Luke's case. And I do think
he gave us the means to do that. See, that's the thing that they try to make you forget. He gave us the simplified payment verification, where you as the user or the merchant doesn't have to have a full node, like what you would call the whole blockchain, but rather the user has the block header. And like now you're asking yourself, well, do you trust cryptography or not? And if you really do need to verify the blockchain, well, then you can go ahead and do that as well, right? So it's interesting now how Luke is the small blocker leading the small block. Him and Jack Dorsey, actually.
Yeah. The
small blockers that want to remain pure to the ultimate small blocker vision. But then those who call the shots in Bitcoin, the core devs, are actually now the big blockers.
So take us through what would happen if this Peter Todd proposal goes through and they remove the arbitrary data limit of op return, right? Because that's where this whole debate began. You know, through your perspective, you know, what are the second order effects? Like what you mentioned at the very beginning, that this is kind of the entrance to, you know, big blocker technology, but, you know, just take us through one by one of what you think happens if that is merged into Bitcoin Core.
Entrepreneurs would be able to do more on chain, would be able to arbitrage more data on chain. More use cases would be able to be written on the blockchain. So you would have another ordinals boom. And is
there anything specific, just just to kind of help us visualize why, you know, the small blockers are terrified, or even, you know, in this repo saying that Bitcoin becomes a shit coin, and what type of, you know, entrepreneurial options will be available if that's merged?
Well, they have this idea. Look, I think everyone here should Google on YouTube Luke Dasher's presentation at the Magical Bitcoin Friends Conference. I think that's what it was called, the Magical Friends Conference, Magical Crypto Conference, Crypto Friends Conference. You'll find his talk where he proposes lowering the block size even more. So if you want to take the small blocker rhetoric or worldview narrative to its logical conclusion, Luke Dasher is 100% right. If you're someone who is a purist and does not want any data arbitrage on the blockchain, and you just want to keep it as a store of value and nothing else then that is your logical conclusion. And I'm all for even lowering the block size on BTC. Let's just get there to its logical conclusion as fast as possible. Screen out all ordinals transactions. The issue here is that there is no solution that they're proposing to do away with the problem that we have once the block reward subsidy decreases even more.
Yeah.
And no one's really offering a solution that makes sense. Again, the solutions are steal Satoshi's coins, break the 21 million cap, which people are actually taking it serious. It's a serious proposal. Demiurge, which is directly stealing your Bitcoin from your wallet whenever, whatever algorithm they set up, so that the miners just take money out of your wallet to subsidize themselves. So taxation on the blockchain. So all of these proposals are preposterous. I had a conversation with Peter Todd at Monerotopia, and he laughed at me, and I'm like, dude, we are showing you the way on how to have a scalable Bitcoin on BTC with ordinals. At the height of ordinals, over 80% of transactions and transaction fees were through transactions that happened on chain when people were trading data on chain, things that people found valuable, no matter whether it was a cartoon or a real world asset traded on chain. So we showed you the way of how to subsidize the miners into the future. You just have to allow us to expand. He laughed at me. He says that proposal's stupid, whatever. But I'm like, dude, we're proving it to you with the little bit space that we have through Taproot to be able to show you what an on-chain economy looks like. Everything, and it's my our take is that everything that you see Solana doing right now could have been done on Bitcoin since 2009. But for some reason, this group did not allow that. Now, quietly, at the same time, they're enabling opcat and about 17 other opcodes that they're working on deploying one by one. But in order to do that effectively, they have to increase the bandwidth to be able to compute script on chain. And they have to do that. So this is the first step in many steps in order to achieve that. So the person from Core or the representative from Blockstream will never say out loud that they are that they're turning Bitcoin into a big blocker blockchain. They cannot say that. They cannot say that. If they say that, then they're saying we were wrong during the Civil War and the BSV and the Bitcoin Cash people were right. They can't say that because these two other networks still pose a huge existential threat to BTC. So I think that to answer your question, I think this is going to give entrepreneurs more of an opportunity to do cool things on chain. Opcat is something that I expect for Opcat and Orange, Michael Saylor's implementation of real world assets on BTC. That's all going to be, I think we're going to have good, real awesome announcements coming up next month at the Bitcoin conference on these fronts. So BTC itself is all moving into this direction. You have to remember that after the Lightning Network failed, and it failed right when ordinals hit the ground. Why did it fail when ordinals hit the ground? Because a bunch of big blockers stepped in with a lot of experience with Bitcoin script, stepped into BTC to make a lot of money in BTC with ordinals. And they demanded from the Lightning Network devs, hey, are you guys, can we actually work here? What do you guys have? What developer stacks do you have for applications using the Lightning Network? And the answer was, we don't have any. The answer was, go build it yourself. So that moment in time, we had a big problem where a lot of Lightning Network developers left and they rage quit because the Lightning Network is a failure. And so, yes, and so then the big hoorah was, so a couple of developers in BTC, Linus, I think is his name, and Super Testnet, they both got inspiration from a big blocker who him and his crew, in my opinion, are some of the biggest geniuses in Bitcoin right now when it comes to computing Bitcoin on chain. And this is Jiawei Liu and Script, who are from BSV. And so they are inspired by him and they create their own virtual machine on BTC, and it's called BitVM. The leading implementation of that is called BitLayer. And then they start selling versions of BitVM to the VC world. So now that the Lightning Network is in trouble, they start selling another approach to layer 2 scaling. In order to do that better, you need to enable opcodes within BTC. And lo and behold, the core devs are already in the process of enabling that on below. They're not really telling anyone about that because, again, this is a PR. It could be a PR backlash. You can't say that you're turning BTC into a big blocker blockchain when you still have BSV with Terranode coming out that is processing over 1 million transactions a second. So like, you can't do that. You have to be very quiet in the way you deploy things. So then one of the top developers of BSV, Xiaowei Lu, steps into BTC, and a lot of the developers from BSV come into BTC, bringing their expertise, and they now position themselves as the teachers to all of these new developers that have arrived to BTC, teaching them about how to compute script on chain, how to work with the UTXO model, because most of these developers come from blockchains like Ethereum, where they're only used to working with the account-based model. And so they're teaching all of these developers, and now you have a whole group. Now there's a battalion of Bitcoin developers that understand what was once forbidden to say, that Bitcoin is Turing complete, that Bitcoin is a Turing complete machine, meaning that Bitcoin is original design as given to us by Satoshi. When you scale that Satoshi version, you have a super computer ready for you to write into it whatever you want. This is Bitcoin with teeth. This is Bitcoin with claws. This is dangerous Bitcoin. This Bitcoin is very dangerous to the establishment. It's Bitcoin with microtransactions that serve the first world. So how, again, you can't say these things out loud. I'm one of those renegades that say these things out loud. And I guess that's just part of my branding. So now you have Xiaowei Lu, you have the guys from Unisat, you guys have the guys from DotSwap, the guys from Ordinal's wallet coming into BTC, and now they're looked upon as like the leaders of how to scale Bitcoin. And Xiaowei Lu is going all over the world now, teaching people on how to compute script on BTC. And he's one of the leading devs outside of Core, teaching people on OpCat and OpCTV. And so in other words, this is all big blocker technology in being embraced by BTC. And so, and it's got the help of the likes of Andrew Polstra, who's actually working on it. He's one of the core devs. I interviewed him back in the day. And Rusty Rosso, another core dev. And now you even have the signaling of someone like Peter Todd, who you'd think he'd be one who's most staunch, who was very much staunchly opposed to any on-chain scaling. Even in my conversation that I shared with him that I had at Monerotopia here, he's now opening up the op return limit. So that's what's happening here, guys. What's happening here is that that's where we're going. And like what Adam said earlier, which was like his logical, I think that's very smart of you, Adam, to actually come to that realization right away, because believe it or not, it's taken a lot of people a long time to come to that realization that, oh my God, this is probably what these guys did to begin with, which is that they made Bitcoin docile, something tameable, something that doesn't have teeth, doesn't have claws, something that is not aggressive to the powers that be. Let the powers that be embrace it. And once it's embraced, wake this animal up. And that very well could be what is happening. It is the only path available to BTC. A lot of people would say, no, Raf, you know what? The only opposition that I see to what I'm saying is this. Raf, sure, everything you're saying is right. They are the core devs and all of these people within Bitcoin are moving in these directions by enabling opcodes with the great script restoration that they're calling. But you don't really even need that, because you have blockchains that are already scalable, like Solana, with like Project Zeus, where you can just wrap BTC and have BTC in Solana enjoy the architecture of a scalable blockchain. So it's so yeah, we are in a place where anything can happen. I honestly wasn't expecting this, that they would be so overt in doing what they did a couple days ago, but it is happening. And
so Raf, let me ask you this
then.
If BTC, you know, if the initial plan was to make it, as you claimed, docile or, you know, friendly to the traditional system, so that it wasn't an immediate threat to things like MasterCard and Visa, et cetera, and now it's viewed as the store of gold, or at least this is the way that TradFi is marketing it, do you think that they would back something like Opcat? Do you think they will back these opcodes, or do you think they will be, or do you think they'll be against it because then it goes against what their current branding is of Bitcoin, and therefore then maybe takes away from, it takes away from the Bitcoin ETF and then flows to some of the other ETFs because it comes much more similar to something like an Ethereum and a Solana. Not obviously the same thing, but from a marketing standpoint to the average individual, that would be taking away from the digital gold aspect and having it as something more similar to a smart contract like platform, has some downstream effects.
I think they already know what Bitcoin's capable of, because if you study Project Hamilton from the Boston Fed, which is the CBDC for the commercial market, that was actually it was one of the core devs that was hired to spearhead this initiative. So core devs were involved in creating the CBDC for the Boston Fed, Project Hamilton. His name escapes me right now, but the name of the dev that was spearheading this effort. So they're not unfamiliar with what scalable Bitcoin's capable of. They're just being very smart in how they deploy it to the world. So what Project Hamilton does is that it gives you programmable Bitcoin without proof of work, but it's the architecture of Bitcoin, UTXO. It's the same architecture as Bitcoin, scalable, programmable, microtransactions, where your money is programmed. So, we don't like your political view. Well, we can program that, you don't have any of these tokens left, in your wallet. So that idea is out there. The powers that shouldn't be are already embracing. They already understand these technologies very well. This is a game now of how to. This is a game of information, guys. It really comes down to us as people who are Bitcoin and crypto natives to educate ourselves on what it was truly that Satoshi gave us. So really, this is just, regardless of what they're planning or what they accept or don't accept, the bottom line here, guys, is that they wanted to make us forget what Satoshi gave us. That was the real focal point here, is to put them, for us to forget what Bitcoin's truly capable of, that Bitcoin is a Turing complete machine, that Bitcoin allows us to do microtransactions, that Bitcoin is a supercomputer, that we have the option to store data on chain if that's what we want to for any reason, something that not even Solana can do. So it's remembering, going back, really studying what Satoshi gave us. And what I've come to realize and learn is that what Satoshi gave us is, humbly speaking, is more powerful than anything that we have in the crypto space right now floating. I know that sounds wild to a lot of people, but in spite of it being the first, it is the most badass technology. Like Team Satoshi really, they were at another level. Just the fact that the UTXO model is just something that people have finally started to really embrace, and it was due to this hack, whatever you want to call it, ordinals, where we're finally able to teach people what the UTXO model and how it allows for scaling to be horizontal in parallel, like any big tech company, that we don't have to share on a global state like Ethereum. That idea itself is very new to computer science still. That idea still is almost like a renegade idea that had to be, people have had to learn by being disobedient to the main narrative. If you embrace this idea and you learn the fullness of Bitcoin, you have to be someone that was willing to go out and work in Antarctica, the forbidden place, while everyone else was in, Wall Street. You have to be that type of person, that person that thinks for themselves, that person that doesn't take what other people say as gospel, but really questions the predominant narrative. And you see the fruit that bears in crypto, because now some of the devs that are most revered in the entire space were people who actually took the plunge and went to learn what Satoshi gave us. It's like Xiaowei Lu, that now is in BTC, and he's like the dude that everybody looks up to regarding Bitcoin Turing completeness. I had him on my show alongside who was the reference person, Super Testnet, and Super Testnet said on my show that his inspiration comes from Xiaowei Lu, and Xiaowei Lu explained how like what Satoshi gave us is like a jet fighter, and what they took away from Bitcoin in the form of BTC, it became almost like a wagon, you know, in comparison to the jet fighter that Satoshi gave us. You have someone like Dean Little, who was a big part of Jupiter swap on Solana, who is now one of the leading devs, if not the leading dev of Zeus, which is ZBTC on Solana. What he was able to do is that he turned Solana into a BTC, into a Bitcoin node, into a Bitcoin SPV node, where like that in itself is the most badass second layer for BTC that you could ever fathom, because you have a fully robust blockchain that scales like Solana, giving Bitcoin the superpowers that Bitcoin should have had. So that is something very commendable. But where does Dean come from? Also BSV. So it's almost like the best thing anyone can do in crypto, if you really, in my opinion, if you really want to be ahead of of the competition, ahead of your peers, you have to go and really study what Satoshi gave us. Like really go back and study the code, study the architecture Satoshi gave us, and that's what's going to give you an edge in any network in crypto, as we're seeing in Solana and BTC with the examples I just gave you. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah, totally. One thing I think that you've kind of pointed out here too is like, and this is I would actually have a different opinion, where you're like, the core devs could never kind of admit that that big blockers were right, or that big blockers was the only path forward with Bitcoin. I actually think that, and I've seen it a million times in crypto and all over the world, really. It's not a crypto thing. People can absolutely be hypocrites. Absolutely. And it can still, people will just human nature, like they'll be able to flush it under the rug that they fought against something, tooth and nail, and literally ruined people's careers and drove them out of Bitcoin in order to push this small blocker narrative, and then go completely opposite, go big block, and people will just fucking whoosh it away. It's like they'll be able to, I'm just saying, they'll be able to do that, and there won't be these massive repercussions, in my view. I feel like they'll be able to do that, and people will be mad who know the history, like you or me or whoever, and may feel slighted and call them hypocrites and be like, this bullshit. But in the end, the majority of the world would just fucking wash it away. Like, oh, well, this is the way we're going now. You know what I mean? It just feels like that will happen. Like they won't be called, they'll be called out a little bit, but it won't be like a massive shift, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, and to go back to Jake's question, like in order for him to do that, BlackRock already signaled that the 21 limit is a question that could change, right? The 21 million cap on BTC can change. They already said that on their promo video. BlackRock runs 4 out of the 5 biggest mining operations in BTC. So no matter what they do, they have to do it in a way that is organized and does not enter into any conflict with their existing portfolios. What we can expect, and which is reasonable, is for there to be rivals in the market with a lot of money that will like to be the black swan in all of this. That's very plausible. It could happen. There's a lot of money to be made there. Could it happen? I don't know. How entrenched is the cabal within crypto to propose an actual opposition to BTC? I don't know. I don't know how entrenched it really is.
I mean, the network effects of Bitcoin, it's like no blockchain comes even nearly close to the kind of the mind space awareness. The secondary one is maybe like Dogecoin. I mean, like I'm Ethereum. Most people have no idea what Ethereum is. Like most real normies, right? Don't have any clue about, these other blockchains. Like it's Bitcoin and then there's nothing. You know what I mean? For most people's mind space, that's almost impossible to overcome, from an awareness perspective. You know what I'm saying? So regardless of the tech, we know too, most people don't give a crap about the tech, right? It's all just kind of like attention games. Yeah, I don't know. Just
what about this? What about, Bitcoin at its core is a tool to fight financial oppression. And after all these years, regardless of number go up or semantics of who was right, who was wrong, and kind of where we are today, as a tool of financial oppression, is the world better off today with Bitcoin, stablecoins, the industry existing than it's ever been before? Or how do you feel we are in terms of a global fight of financial oppression?
We're definitely better off. I think that what we have to realize is that BTC and the stable coins that run the market, you can see them as cushions for eventual real disruptive technology, cushions for real disruptive technology to land. So in a sense, the PSYOP, whether it come by way of BTC actually scaling, or now that this idea of a cryptocurrency is something that is accepted by the world, this opens up the opportunity for others to come in and be disruptive. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, and just kind of, I think that we've just made so much progress, and it's easy to get bogged down in the weeds within the industry of like, not everything's perfect, but we've made so much progress. We've made like infinite progress to get here where we are today. And it wasn't guaranteed that we would be here today. So however we got here today is the most important thing, whether they were playing 4D chess or not, and they foresaw that they would eventually need big blocks, or if we just got lucky and we ended up in the position that we are today and we are going to kind of merge to big blocks. The only thing that actually matters in reality is that we did get here. And then we have the opportunity to make another move to go forward. Whether that brings more financial security to the world or not, we'll have to see. But we actually did get here, which kind of seems like the most important thing of all time. Yep. And I just think that, it's really easy to kind of get distracted with all these different communities, everyone kind of having their own self-interest, trying to pump their own tokens and everything else. But a world without Bitcoin, even if it's flawed in today's design, is like 100x better improvement than a world without Bitcoin. And so I think it's just super important that we got here.
Yeah, I agree. And so, which brings me back to like that which is always there for us, which is privacy. It's regardless of what happens out in the external world of Bitcoin and these transparent ledgers that are competing in the open market, the fact that we have privacy coins, that alone gives me a lot of peace of mind, knowing that we have these technologies to be able to survive in any worst case scenario. So that makes me very happy. And granted, we still can do a lot more. There's a project, for example, called CryptoKit Radio. I think it was CryptoKit Radio. I'll send you guys a link in a little bit, where they were sending Bitcoin in 2014, 2013 through ham radio. Yeah. That was incredible. And something that I think in Europe people could be using right now. So yes, I agree with you that in terms of market adoption, I'm happy we got here. However, I'm one of those guys that want to remind people that there's a lot more to Bitcoin that we should not forget. We should study, like this aspect of being able to send Bitcoin through ham radio. That cannot happen in BTC right now, because BTC doesn't have an architecture for SPV, for simplified payment verification, that is robust or well-defined for people to be able to send microtransactions via ham radio. That's not possible in BTC, but you can do it on other implementations of Bitcoin. And it gives me hope that if they do scale Bitcoin and they allow for microtransactions again, then we'll be able to have a more redundant Bitcoin that doesn't rely just on the internet.
One question, and this is kind of a thought exercise I've had with not only Bitcoiners, but especially when I go to like a Litecoin conference and we're talking, you know, like the last Litecoin summit I was at, and they're trying to like get adoption and stuff. And I'm like, guys, just lean into like payments, just be, you know, a payment layer, get on board. Basically what BTC was trying to do in 2012 and 13, which is you get Microsoft to accept Litecoin and you get your local store to accept Litecoin and but they kept focusing on like number go up technology. And I'm like, it just feels like, and in the same way, I'll roll it back into privacy coins. Like privacy coins, would you be happy if Monero or Dash or whatever you're using as a privacy layer just stayed flat and became like widely accepted? Or does it always have to be based on, you know, number go up? Like, how do you look at that from like an adoption curve? Does there always have to be a number go up aspect to these things for them to get widespread adoption?
First and foremost, the people who we should have been going after as the primary base of users were people who needed these technologies the most. Like I said already, people who need these technologies in their day-to-day life. And it's not just the person who needs to buy, you know, drugs on Silk Road. No, I'm talking about the person who's selling tacos in the corner on some Mexican street. That person who's unbanked, instead of walking on with a wad of cash, that puts himself vulnerable to any criminal. If you were to be able to exchange sats, you know, or Monero, I think that's a better that is a solution to that pain point that a lot of people that live in the world that are unbanked have. So no, necessarily we don't see. That's not even my. I personally don't care if number go up or doesn't go up in regards to adoption, because I agree with you 100%. Adoption is the most important thing. For example, my buddies and I, two of my friends and I, we onboarded over 70 businesses in Austin, Texas to Bitcoin in 2012, 2013. So over 70 businesses in downtown Austin, Texas were taking Bitcoin as payment. You know, so it's like, I'm totally with you. We need these technologies to be adopted by the people, because again, otherwise you get very flaky user base. You get like degens who really are there, but not really a base of people who actually need the technology. Or you get the crapshoot of like who, you know, how much infusion of institutional capital will be thrown into Bitcoin or crypto. And then at that point in time, how much can you do for the protocol once these giants own the majority share of the protocol? And that's kind of like where we're at, because if this is a big a discussion that some people are having on the back end, I'm going to share with you guys, which is this: BTC has no choice but to scale. We all agree with that. BTC has no choice but to scale. Even the Bitcoin core devs, like I've said, they're already getting ready to roll out 19 opcodes. Peter Todd, out of all people, are expanding the size of the op return. Okay, but there's an urgency to scale, guys. It's not like they can just sit around and just allow another 4 years to pass. They should have scaled BTC, in my opinion, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when ordinals came out. That's when all of this should have really rolled out. And I think that now that the bull market is coming to its end, because we all understand TA to some degree, and we understand that this bull market will eventually turn into a bear market sometime by the end of this year or next year. Then come a bear market and come a next halving. If you haven't scaled by then, a second layer won't suffice, won't meet the demand of the miners. So what are the miners going to do? Well, sure, you can say, well, the block can, the block reward can recalibrate, and yes, but what about all this infrastructure in mining? Where does that go? And remember, there are scalable Bitcoin options out there that are also SHA-256 that are ready to receive these miners, that are nonstop working on creating use cases to embrace this mining architecture. So what's going to save Bitcoin overall, it's going to be Bitcoin itself. And so I think the core devs are late. Look at how much pushback we're getting right now from a lot of small blockers, a lot of people in BTC. There's a lot of pushback happening to Bitcoin Core right now. I don't think that's going to stop. I think that's going to just augment in volume, in noise. And I honestly think Core is late to the game. I think they're late to scaling Bitcoin. And remember also that this is moving more and more out of their hands because players like Sailor, BlackRock, governments like the U.S. government are now owning this protocol more and more each day. And these people are not necessarily, as smart as native Bitcoiners. So how much will they, what is it that they will actually allow to scale in the future? And that's the big question, is like, you have to do it now before the network gets out of your hands. And that's, it gets very political. And I think it's a huge mess. Guys, this is a huge mess. Mostly, you know why it's like such a huge mess? Because Bitcoin development became political in its nature. It sees, and I hate to say this out to the world, but I'm sorry, guys, but it stopped being decentralized, as people would want to tell you, because the user-activated soft forks were easily to Sybil attack, as I already explained, and because ultimately the core devs have veto power. And having that veto power puts them in the position of control over the network. And that's why this move from Peter Todd, which received no bureaucratic backlash from their inner circle, is something that everybody jumps at, because you have a lot of propositions that have been given in Bitcoin history that have had a lot of bureaucratic push, like BIP 300, BIP 301 in recent times. That's Paul Storks, or more recently Opcat. Opcat has had to deal with some bureaucratic push, and so it's
very telling. Yeah, it's very telling.
So it's almost like, I honestly think BTC is out of time for scaling, and I think that's why, and I think they've realized that they're out of time, and a lot of it comes down to, like what I mentioned, that in Germany it's $200,000 to mine one Bitcoin worth $90,000 right now. So the economic pressure's coming.
Yeah, how long are the miners going to put up with that before they move on to something else, or the price of Bitcoin comes down? One of the two, right? Can't people? Yeah.
And at the same time, it's like, what if, my goal in my life would be, dude, like, the world needs to rug those who want to enslave humanity financially. And it's almost at the point where now Bitcoin's at the mercy of those who have forever rugged humanity financially. And guess what BlackRock can easily do? They can rug Bitcoin financially. They could do that. Why not? They can rug the entire crypto space. And then what? You're left with Project Hamilton, written by the core devs, like, that's what you have left, and so this is what's mind-boggling to me is that the Bitcoin opcodes and the Bitcoin superpowers that they took away from BTC, you find them in Project Hamilton. So when you talk about hypocrisy, I mean, that right there is like, that to me is fucking evil, dude. So you use Bitcoin superpowers. You take away the Bitcoin superpowers from the people, but you give them to the CBDC from the Boston Fed. Like,
yeah,
what's going on? And so, So if you really want to stay on the sidelines of all this BS, privacy coins, Monero is the way to go, because it's just a peaceful place where people are creating, economies that scale in the open market, that are free from this coercion and this, politicking. So it is what it is, guys. I mean, see, the thing is that right now we don't know what to expect, because we know that the core devs have lived under many different pressures. one of the pressures that they had to live under was the pressure of the constant threats from Craig Wright, for example. That was a pressure that affected a lot of their decisions in the past couple of years. Now they have other pressures, you know. You got Larry Fink in the mix. How are you going to answer to his desires and needs? So,
yeah, it's going to be a battle. We're going to see how it rolls out, man. It's going to be fun over the next year or two to see how this shakes out. But at the core, you know we always can have freedom money. It's just we just get to choose it, right? If we want to choose it, we can have it. Whether or not it's going to be Bitcoin, BTC itself, or something else, they can't stop it from happening if we want it to happen. But Jake, maybe we want to wrap it up. Appreciate your time.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So it's always great chatting with you, hearing the philosophical side of the debate. You know, that's tend to have been lost over the last few years in the crypto industry, whereas things have moved more towards, you know, financial lingo and attention games. But it's, you know, it's really encouraging to see that there still is this ideological debate that happens on Bitcoin, because it shows that, you know, there's still real believers here who are who believe in the technology more than about, you know, number go up, which, you know, regardless of what side of the fence you live on or believe, these are the type of conversations that need to be held to ensure that all options have been explored and that the overall crypto community is aware of what's going on. So, dude, always appreciate your time and also just your authenticity on it.
I have alpha for everyone watching and listening, okay? So we already know that the future of Bitcoin is one that aims to scale Bitcoin as much as possible by enabling more capacities on-chain within BTC itself. That is not argued anymore. We understand that Bitcoin has Turing-complete capabilities on-chain. That's not a point of contention. That all the core devs, they all agree on this. We all agree on this. The whole Bitcoin universe agrees on this. If you want to edge in this market, and this is the killer alpha here, guys. If you want an edge in this market to know where the puck is going or it could possibly go, you got to go and study scalable Bitcoin. You got to study scalable Bitcoin. See it as a test net, as a sandbox where all of these opcodes have already been enabled. Go over there and look at what they're working on. Look at what they've discovered about Bitcoin. Because believe it or not, that is exactly where the fountain of inspiration is coming for BTC.
Bam. The alpha has been said. Crypto Vigilante, always a great time. Raph, you're a beast. I appreciate everyone for joining us. Later today, we are doing a live stream with Luke Wright, who's a big Litecoin and Bellscoin advocate, speaking of UTXO. So we'll be diving into the world of AI. And then Thursday, we're doing our afternoon show. We're actually going to be moving the morning show to 10 a.m. Pacific time moving forward, as we do focus a little bit more on Agent Hustle and the AI world, but we'll still be encouraging and having these awesome debates like we do with Raph. So until then, everyone enjoy your Wednesday. We'll be back later tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific. Stay safe out there and have a good one.
Now we are dealing with a possible world war. Some will say we are already in a world war. My condolences and prayers go out to everyone suffering under tyranny. It really sucks. I'm really sorry. But it seems as if people are starting to wake up regarding crypto more and more each day. And so it's in the description right here to read, where we give our secret sauce and what we teach our subscribers, because things are just that bad. You know, everyone needs this information. People need to know about sound cryptocurrencies that are actually private by default, and to know how to properly use crypto.